Welcome to a special edition of the Gramophone podcast, joining you live from the Three Choirs Festival in Hereford. I'm Hattie Butterworth, and as well as being host of the podcast, I'm also the editor of Choir and Organ Magazine, which has this year begun a media partnership with the Three Choirs Festival. It's a festival that rotates each year between the cathedrals of Hereford, Worcester and Gloucester, and laid its roots back in the early 18th century with informal annual musical gatherings between the three cathedrals. In 1838 it was named the Three Choirs Festival, and over its 300-year history it's hosted premieres of works by a huge number of major English composers, including Edward Elgar, Ethel Smythe, Ralph Vaughan Williams, and more recently Judith Weir, James Macmillan and Cheryl Frances Hode. Today, commissioning is still at the forefront of what it does, as well as reviving lesser known or forgotten works, which was quite a big theme of this year's festival. So much of what it does as well is just going all out with some immense choral favourites. I was actually brought up in Herefordshire. Part of growing up around these cathedrals and buildings and being interested in music meant developing an understanding of the heritage of this area and the composers that came from it. So this year's festival programme has been developed by Hereford Cathedral's Director of Music, Geraint Bowen, who also conducted the opening concert of the work I'd not heard before, which was the William Matias, This World's Joy. I'm just sitting in the Cathedral Close. The concert last night was really very special, especially the second half, the William Matias, This World's Joy, which I'd never heard before, and it had this just really electric, exciting energy, and it was all set in sort of medieval poetry, and the way he kind of did that, it had a lot of energy of Walton and Bernstein and that kind of sparkly percussion cathedral energy, and I really want to hear it again. I was very excited by that. I spoke to Geraint following the performance to get his perspective. Congratulations on Saturday.
Thank you.
That was something very special,
Yeah.
especially if you hadn't heard the Matthias before, which I hadn't.
All right.
What was your sense of the energy of that?
Well, it was a great thing to do because it's actually the fifth time I've conducted the piece. Did it for the first time when I was in my previous job in St David's, then did it my first Hereford Festival in 2003. Done it a couple of times with our choral society here, and then it's great doing it this time as well. And with the Philharmonia, just amazing.
Tell me as well about your choristers, because that was they had quite a big role in the Matthias. And it was, often what people say about having a mixed choir of boys and girls, that you don't get this unity of sound or this purity of sound, but I feel like you really showed that's not true.
Oh, thank you.
Because you brought in girls in 2022.
Yes, that's right.
Tell me about, since then, how it's felt.
The great thing about Hereford, because I've been here just a couple of weeks off, 24 years now, is, as my predecessor, Roy Massey, always used to say to me, that this is a place of evolution rather than revolution. So that we didn't have girls here for nearly all of my time here, something I became increasingly more and more unhappy and embarrassed about. The reason that we hadn't had them before is nothing but the truth, which is that we couldn't afford it. To establish a complete separate top line. And then COVID came along, and I think that to some extent all the cards got thrown up in the air during COVID, and people started maybe thinking not so much along the tram lines that they had done before. And it was very interesting. I was having kind of private conversations with a few of my colleagues who were clearly thinking along the same lines, and a number of other places made the same decision within a matter of weeks that we did. We made an announcement in early February, I think, 2022, and the first 2 or 3 girls joined the choir about 3 weeks later. And so everything's different, but everything is the same, which is what I love about it. Because there they were standing up and doing that. They've been absolutely tremendous.
This year, the festival has 2 big new commissions, one from Richard Blackwood and one from Bob Chilcott. I caught up with the festival's chair, Naomi Belshaw, to talk about the commitment to commissioning that the festival has.
This year's programme feels like it so perfectly demonstrates that old and new connection. Talk about the importance of providing a platform for new music for composers, and maybe what did they have back then that we could have more of now?
I mean, I think it's a tricky one to look at, and I think there's an interesting example in our festival this year with Samuel Coleridge Taylor and his Atonement, because it was kind of lost. We commissioned it in 1903, then it was essentially lost for I don't know how long, over 100 years, and someone had to find it in the Royal College of Music eventually to find the original score, and I'm so excited it's back here, and we're celebrating it. And so it's I feel like for composers it's a really difficult world they live in, where they're trying to get works off the ground, but they're also trying to create music that could become blockbusters that get performed again and again. But how do you make that happen? I think that's where Three Choirs Festival can be a really good advocate for composers, to celebrate new but also then re-promote it and bring it back to our audiences, and then other audiences can find it like that.
Part of the future which you announced this week is the engagement of, what are you calling this new composer?
I think he is composer in residence.
Composer in residence.
Or whoever is composer in residence. I'm really excited about this new scheme. I think because for me it harks back to seeing what Vaughan Williams and Elgar and Holst from our past being so much part of the Three Choirs Festival. I think having a composer in residence, or we want a scheme that will have composers in residence for 3 years at least, and then a rolling scheme that has composers after that, it will be a real opportunity for those composers to engage with our audience, and for our audience to get to know their music, for them to be commissioned for new pieces as well. So already existing music and new works coming through the Three Choirs Festival, but not just being a dip in and leave, but we're going to champion them for a few years, and so they become properly part of our legacy again. And I think that harks back to what was happening perhaps naturally more at the festival over 100 years ago. So I think, I'm very excited about that.
And you're allowed to tell us who that is?
Yes, it is, very excitingly, the composer Gavin Higgins.
This year's announcement of Gavin Higgins' associate composership is an exciting move forward for the festival in its commitment to commissioning and also creating a sort of similar atmosphere to that which existed during Elgar's time and Vaughan Williams' time, where these composers would be known to the audiences and they'd be known to the festival, and the audiences would get to know their work in quite an intimate way. I hosted a Q&A with composer Richard Blackwood just before the performance of his new commission, The Black Lake, and asked him about the work, how he discovered it, and what he was hoping to do with the commission.
Why don't you tell us a bit about how this commission started? Because I know back in 1993, we're looking all the way back to then, to when you wrote incidental music, is that right, for a play?
So this work you're going to hear tonight has had roughly 30 years of thought and meditation in many ways. I was asked in the mid-1990s to write incidental music for a play version of Full Moon, the novel in which The Black Lake is based, for Theatre Pluid in Mold, directed by Helena Kauthausen. And in those days, I was writing quite a lot of incidental music for productions at the National Theatre and various others. And, incidental music is fine, you do your best, but it's a very smallish contribution to a play. There was something about this one that was different. We were fortunate to co-opt a small Welsh male voice choir, and that transformed the production into something very, very special indeed. And this novel, this miraculous novel by Caradog Pritchard, and Caradog Pritchard's daughter, Mary Pritchard, has come to Hereford tonight for the premiere. There is something about it that just haunted me. In the early 2000s, I wrote a clarinet quintet for the Aberystwyth Festival, and it dominated that as well. It's an abstract piece, but it was about a further exploration of the themes that you're going to hear in the Black Lake. And so when Free Choirs Festival asked me what I would like as a subject, I thought this time I really want to go deeply into the piece one more time. And with the aid of a huge chorus and orchestra and soloists and narrators, I want to go deeply into exploring the miraculous and myriad themes that Full Moon is about.
And I'm really interested about the sessions you had with Mary Pritchard as well, because you said that this is sort of a semi-autobiographical novel. So I can imagine speaking to Caradog's daughter must have had an impact somewhere creating this piece. Can you tell us maybe a bit about what you learned from speaking with her about her father and about maybe some of the influence of this piece?
Mary Pritchard is a formidable woman, highly intelligent and academic, and lives in Oxford. She's also the keeper of, if you like, the grail of Full Moon, this novel. And I can't underestimate how important this book is in Wales. It's an A-level set text. It's been translated into over 40 languages. Most people in Wales who are interested in fiction will know about this, just as they know Under Milkwood of Dylan Thomas. So Mari feels a great responsibility, not only because it's her father's work, but it's very largely about her father's life. He isn't necessarily the boy all the way through, but very large elements are autobiographical. She was very skeptical when I went to her to say, are you willing to contemplate a libretto, me sketching out a libretto in which only a few scenes, because there are hundreds of scenes in this, can be actually planned together to give some sort of an arc which gives a worthy rendition of the essence of the novel. And she said, well, go ahead and try it, and I'll look at it. And immediately she saw the first draft that I made. She said there are a lot of problems with it. She's fluent in Welsh herself. She was interested very much in the hymn aspect and the tradition of hymn singing. And particularly there's a scene which you'll hear tonight, the revival, where people have hallucinations. There's a scene called The Wheel of Fire, where an old drunk called Will imagines a wheel of fire, and he's completely drunk, and because of this he has a spiritual kind of revelation and gives up alcohol as a result of it. And she said that there are scenery lists which will lend themselves magnificently to musical treatment, but how are you actually going to condense so much material into a work that is going to last no longer than 45 to 50 minutes? And so over a period of weeks, we did work together. I visited her several times. And finally she said, yeah, I'm going to give permission. Don't call it Full Moon, because it isn't the whole story. And I said, well, scenes from Full Moon? And she said, no, that sounds no good either. And I said, what about the Black Lake, which is one of the images that dominates the whole piece? And she said, yes, well, we'll call it the Black Lake.
I'm just sat in the courtyard outside the cathedral, having a bit of a coffee before I speak to the dean, having a bit of a coffee before I speak to the presenter, Andrew, and just thinking back to last night. every time the bells go off or the clock, it's very atmospheric. It's a very like beautifully, I don't know, historic sound. You can also hear the choir rehearsing for tonight. I think it's the youth choir. There's a new commission tonight, Bob Chilcott piece. But yeah, last night we heard Britain's Illumination with the BBC National Orchestra of Wales and David's Hill, which was really stunning. Elizabeth Watts, the soprano, I think she absolutely captivated every single person in the cathedral, and her understanding of the text and just like, I don't know, you just couldn't not watch her. It was absolutely breathtaking, and it's not a piece I knew before. And then Richard Blackford's The Black Lake was a really deep experience of sort of how it's possible to tell a story almost in an operatic sense, but within a cathedral. So he had these two narrators who were telling the story, and underneath it was underscored with this beautiful orchestration. And then at moments where there was a kind of strong emotional impact, Elizabeth Watts was the soprano who kind of brought those songs to life. And there was a big Welsh hymnodic element. There was an Ascension Day hymn that had been recomposed to kind of have a slightly eerie undertone to it, which I thought that was really clever. Yeah, it was a really beautiful experience. And then we went across to St. Peter's Church for the late night concert from 10:15, which was with Lottie Betstein, mezzo-soprano, and the guitarist Dimitris Soukaras. And they presented this really fascinating programme, putting John Dowland's music. So John Dowland is a composer of sort of Tudor court, putting that next to Nick Drake, the 20th century singer-songwriter, and kind of Lottie sort of spoke and gave extracts of letters and reflections people have had on Nick Drake and of John Dowland. And it was a really, really stunning experience. Her voice has this ability to be totally sort of, I mean, she was singing Dowland and then Nick Drake and then back to Dowland. And you'd think that would be quite difficult for a vocalist to kind of adjust to those styles. But it seemed to be so natural to her. She's got this really clean intonation and sort of bravery with her tone, which really allows for her to do basically anything with it. So that was a really special experience. It's quite hard to hear a full evening concert and then be sort of still excited for a 10:15 concert. But as soon as she began, I just knew I was where I needed to be that evening. And it was a real testament to kind of this special atmosphere that can be created with the kind of more on the edge events of the festival in different venues. And it was really full. I think it was about 150 tickets were sold, and it was, completely just full of people. And I didn't know whether those events would be as attractive, because obviously, a lot of people are tired at that time of day, especially on a Sunday evening. But no, it was very, very special. Three Choirs has attracted choral and church music enthusiasts from across the world, but especially has a strong American following. It now even has its own American Friends group, which runs its own events and socials throughout the festival for those who have travelled from the US to be part of the choral tradition. I met a young American choral singer, Olivia, who was volunteering at the festival and singing in the youth choir. This was her first visit to the UK, having sung standard British church music repertoire for many years in an Episcopalian church choir.
Honestly, I can't remember exactly when I learned about the Three Choirs Festival for the first time, but I know that I've known about it for many, many years, and it's always been something that I've really admired and has always been really exciting to me. And I've always had that inkling of like, oh my gosh, I wish I could be there, but it's never been feasible. And so when I got my grant, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the first place I'm going.
So tell me what the grant is for and what you're hoping to do with this year.
The grant I received is called the Watson Fellowship, which is basically a grant for graduating college seniors from the U.S. to have a year of purposeful international travel, to really learn how to be independent, how to be good global citizens, how to be global leaders, and experience the world in a way that they never have before, and to pursue something that is really deeply personal and significant to you. And so my year is about choral music, and I don't know who I would be without music. It feels like it's my entire life. I've been a musician my whole entire life, and actually I've only been a singer for the last couple of years, but it really speaks to me in a way that no other music does. I just find it so deeply spiritual, and I'm not even particularly religious, but it's like when people say that they feel God, it's like that's probably what I'm feeling when I listen to choral music or when I'm singing, and it's just something that I always want to be a part of my life, and that's why I want to dedicate this entire year to that. And there's no better way than to start it with the Three Choirs Festival, singing in the youth choir and volunteering and just being as involved as I can and experiencing all of the amazing programs that there are. I mean, every single day it's like famous thing after like top musician after top musician and premier ensemble after premier ensemble, and it's so incredible, and I'm just so happy and grateful to be here.
Part of what makes the Three Choirs Festival unique is the centrality of faith and prayer. Every concert begins with a short moment of prayer, and it's bookended by opening and closing Eucharist services. But what does music give to the faith life of the cathedral and vice versa? I caught up with three members of clergy at the cathedral to get their perspectives on the impact of the Three Choirs.
Well, I think it's what makes Three Choirs Festival different from all other music festivals. The daily worship is at the core of it. People come from all over the world, not just to hear wonderful music, but to hear music in worship.
And obviously, you start every concert in the cathedral with a moment of prayer. Why do you think that still happens? And why do you think that that's an important moment to share?
From my perspective, I think there's something actually about the space itself. And there is something about being in that place of ancient heritage, ancient history, where people are far more open to the possibility of the spiritual and the transcendent than they would be, say, in a concert hall. You know, a prayer in a concert hall would feel very much out of place. But in this place where there is this history and these stories and this music has been resounding for hundreds and hundreds of years, it feels absolutely appropriate to invite people to just touch base with the core purpose of why we're all here, actually. And I think the prayer before the music, it sets the scene for what's about to come. It's saying that this is not just a human composition for the sake of entertainment and enjoyment. We're inviting you to enter another dimension, another realm. It becomes what we kind of the faith call a thin veil place, where people are invited to within the music and that experience to encounter something of the divine. And I think the prayer sets that off beautifully.
And more fundamentally, I think because this festival has risen out of faith and out of sacred music and out of church, to retain that, even just a bite of that at the beginning of every concert, just is an aide memoire of what we're about here. Because if you took the prayer and the worship out of the Three Choirs Festival, it would be a festival like any other. Wouldn't need to be in cathedrals, probably be much easier if it wasn't in cathedrals, but because it's in cathedrals, it has that absolute root that goes deep and powerful and profound.
And I think I'd add to that, of course, many of the people who come to Three Choirs, again from all over the world, are themselves practicing Christians, many of whom are church musicians in their local church. And so keeping them spiritually nourished and refreshed during the week. This in many ways is a spiritual as well as a musical pilgrimage for them. And they go away encouraged to continue their ministry in their place. And I think that's an important part of what they offer.
I'm just back in Hereford now, having been in London for a few days, and I'm about to go and hear the Three Choirs' performance of Samuel Coleridge Taylor's sacred cantata, The Atonement. Now, from my reading, this is a work that hasn't been heard in the UK for over 100 years. It was premiered in Hereford Cathedral in 1903 with Samuel Coleridge Taylor conducting the piece. And it didn't have the greatest reception. The audience was said to have enjoyed it, but critically, the critics did not like the piece. They found the libretto was sort of too forward-thinking, maybe. They called it words like blasphemous, and it's a libretto that was written by a local feminist called Alice Parsons, which is the person that Coleridge Taylor chose to write the libretto for this work, and historically is an interesting insight into the workings of Coleridge Taylor's mind and what he was looking for in a collaboration. I'm about to speak to the soprano Rebecca Hardwick, who has a small role tonight as Pilate's wife, and I'm really looking forward to hearing kind of her view on how the piece sounds. So we're in the Hereford Cathedral cloisters, and I'm joined by the singer Becky Hardwick. Thank you for talking to me.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
And you are a Worcester born and bred
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Person. Tell me about your kind of history with the festival.
Well, so I was born in Worcester and I went to King's Worcester, which is part of Worcester Cathedral. And basically my brother was in the choir, so the festival was a big part of my childhood each summer. Unfortunately, I wasn't allowed to be in the choir because I was a girl, and that was before girls were in the choir. So I was always a spectator. And then as an adult, I started visiting the festival just because, I love it. It's just, there's nothing like it. It's so fun, and the variety of repertoire and even songs, if you like an even song, and the beer tent, which is a crucial element. And then eventually, in about 2000, I think it was 2022 is my first one, I sang in my first Three Choirs Festival. So that was fantastic. And I've sung for the last 3 years doing various different things. And it's been fantastic.
So are you also an opera person?
Yes. So I trained at the Royal College of Music. And I've just finished a performance doctorate at the Guildhall too. But my career kind of encompasses lots of different things. So oratorio, and opera and recitals, and I've had the same church job for 10 years as well because I love it so much in Marylebone at St James's Spanish Place.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
The Catholic Church.
The Catholic Church.
The big Catholic Church.
The big Catholic Church.
So back to tonight, you are part of Samuel Coleridge Taylor's The Atonement,
Yes.
which was written in 1903 for Hereford.
Yes.
Obviously you've got quite a small role in tonight.
Yes.
You can relax a little bit.
Yeah.
But from the rehearsals and from what you've been hearing and feeling, what can you tell us about this piece and its energy?
Well, it feels really lush, like this big kind of, crushy, like orchestral music. My aria feels very kind of romantic and kind of almost slushy. I want to say the word slushy.
Like opera kind of slushy, or?
it's kind of, it almost feels a little bit kind of vintage cinematic, I would
Oh,
say.
cool.
That's what I'm getting from it. So I'm playing Pilot's wife. So, you know, I sort of have to stand up and say, I had a dream in the middle of all this drama. And I did ask Sam if I could do it from the pulpit, and he said that no.
You tried.
I tried.
You did your
best. Yeah, so it's going to be great. And it's just so fun. Because I don't think it's been performed, you know, it's been performed very little since it was written. I don't know how many times, but, you know, not very much. And when I was learning it, there was no recording of it that I could find. So, you know, I'm sort of learning it, you know, just through the piano. And, you know, that's fun, because then it feels like you're learning something, well, you are learning something totally new. You know, and that's amazing that the three choirs can champion things like that, you know, like maybe have been lost slightly over the years, but are totally gorgeous. And, you know, the audience are going to love it. It's just really, really... Despite the dramatic text, I found that, you know, it's kind of like really enriching kind of music, and, you know, put a smile on my face today.
So we just had an introduction to next year's 2026 programme. It'll be in Gloucester Cathedral and coincides with the installation of and an unveiling of a brand new organ. So a lot of the music that's been chosen includes works for organ, and I'm just very, very excited. If you're a lover of big choral music, there is really nowhere else to be next July than Gloucester, because Adrian Partington, who's the director of music there, he's put together a programme of just what we would call banger after banger. So one concert that sticks in my mind is Elgar's Symphony No. 1, followed by Walton's Belshazzar's Feast, and then also Elgar's Dream of Gerontius, which is just blows my mind every time I hear it. Also Poulenc's Organ Concerto, which is so exciting, and the Bernstein Chichester Psalms. If you're not already done with just incredible, like, hair-raising choral sound, it's a very fun programme, and yeah, I'm already really excited to go and experience it. It also has a new commission of a set of evening canticles from Gavin Higgins, which I think is like a brilliant way for him to start this collaboration, because it's just like imagining Gavin's perspective on that text and like the evening service. I think it's just going to be something so fresh and so brilliant. So I'm already really, really looking forward to that. So I've just come back from the Coleridge Taylor premiere, which was really interesting. It was such a great experience to hear that for the first time. It had some very exciting moments. I wouldn't say as a piece it was like it didn't really do it for me as a piece. It wasn't a sort of Gerontius or a big, I wouldn't say that it was like a masterpiece, to be honest. But it doesn't mean it shouldn't have been done. And I'm really thrilled that it has been done and that I heard it. Because there were some really... The text especially really made me think. Three Choirs is a festival which feels to me like a retreat, a time for reflection, a time for connection, and a time for just allowing space and music to just fill you completely. And also something that's really struck me this year is how much people love this music. I think it's important to remember that a lot of these people that I'm meeting in the audience, they're a lot of the time people that don't live in Herefordshire. They're people that travel to come and experience this music. And you sit there and you think, yeah, this is something to travel a long way for. These are programs that are being developed which have such an amazing balance between old, new, exciting, innovative. It really is just showing itself to be such a warm place and such an interesting place just to meet people from everywhere. So I've had such a fantastic week. I really urge you to go and explore next year's programme. And if you are able to make it across to Gloucester in 2026, I think it's going to be something incredibly special. Thank you for joining me for this special episode of the Gramophone podcast. Please do leave us a rating or review and follow us on social media if you're interested. Our handle is generally at Gramophone Magazine. And join us again next week for another Gramophone podcast.